Chapter 1 Am I Barron? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1 I Am Barron. When he woke up, Chen Kai felt a splitting headache. He secretly vowed never to drink so much again. The recent global economic situation is not very optimistic. As the Overseas Department of Investment Banks, Chen Kai and others are also under great pressure. After finally completing a big order, he naturally needed to relax. Alcohol and beautiful women were both essential. So after a night of partying, Chen Kai woke up again. Looking at the person next to him who had also just woken up, he subconsciously used the girl covering her body with quilt. Ah! Amid the girl's loud exclamation, Chen Kai couldn't help but cover his ears. Why am I here? That the girl spoke English with a pure English accent, but at this time, he was not in the mood to answer the girl's question, but tried his best to remember. Chen Kai was not surprised that a strange girl appeared next to him after he was hungover. After all, in an industry like theirs, people are usually under a lot of pressure and play crazy. They often do this with a few friends. Kind of thing, but, why is she a foreign girl today, and she speaks very good English? It's not that he doesn't understand, but it's a bit strange. Ming vaguely remembered that he met a pair of sisters at a bar last night and brought them to the hotel after drinking. Could it be that while he was drinking, one of his other bad friends played a special game with him? Although he really couldn't remember the reason, he still needed to face it under the current scene. This foreign girl with flaxen hair, a few freckles on her face, and a somewhat familiar appearance seemed to have calmed down a bit. She reached out to pick up the clothes scattered on the ground, muttering something in her mouth, and then after getting dressed under the quilt, he picked up the bag on the bedside table and walked into the bathroom. Listening to the faint sound of water running from the bathroom, Chen Kai knew that the other party must be taking a shower, and from the light coming from the cracks in the curtains, he could tell that it was already broad daylight. Subconsciously, he reached out and picked up the mobile phone on the bedside. Looking at the rather nostalgic Motorola flip phone in his hand, Chen Kai suddenly felt confused. In addition, at this moment, he finally remembered that the layout of the room he was in seemed slightly different from the room at the Ritz-Carlton Hotel where he stayed last night. What's the situation? At this moment, he suddenly felt as if a burst of electricity went straight through his brain, and bursts of movie-like images flashed before his eyes. It seems that my brain is like a trash can at this time. Too many things have been forcibly stuffed into it, and even the Tianling cap is about to be lifted. Then, Chen Kai's vision went dark and he fell on the bed again. Are you okay? But when he regained consciousness again, Chen Kai opened his eyes and saw the girl's slightly nervous face. That appearance still feels so familiar. I should be fine, maybe I was a little tired last night. Hearing Chen Kai's words, the girl seemed to have thought of something. Her face turned slightly red, and she turned to glare at him. Asshole, I shouldn't care about you, I'm leaving. At this time, the girl had packed up. He was wearing a purple sweater and a plaid skirt. Under the skirt were black cotton socks and boots. As she spoke, she picked up her windbreaker from the sofa nearby and put it on, grabbed her satchel and turned towards the door. When her figure was about to disappear around the corner of the porch, she suddenly stopped, turned her head and took a deep look at Chen Kai, and said, "Our last night was just a mistake. It was all because I was in a bad mood and went to the bar to drink too much. You know, I hope we all forget about that." Until the sound of the door closing sounded, Chen Kai was still lying like this. His head was not as painful as it was at the beginning, but apart from the feeling of hangover, the most troublesome thing in front of him was his current situation. Chen Kai, well, we shouldn't call him Chen Kai anymore, his current name is Baron Cavendish. Yes, now he already has the memories of two people in his mind. One is Chen Kai, and the other comes from this young man named Baron Cavendish. After getting up, he walked to the bathroom, and in the mirror on the sink, he saw the handsome blonde white face in it, which belonged to his current body. Baron Cavendish, this reality is hard to accept, isn't it? Who would have thought that Chen Kai, who was originally in 2023, would go directly to 2002 20 years ago after one night of indulgence, and become a native British man? Chen Kai, now Baron, he felt that he needed to sort out his thoughts and slowly accept this incredible reality. After washing his face and looking at the childish face in the mirror again, he couldn't help but scratch his hair. F***K, what kind of bullshit plot is this? The mobile phone is a Motorola flip phone that was quite popular at the time, but it has been turned off. It should have turned off automatically after the battery ran out of power last night. He simply remembered that he had a charger in his bag, so he took it out, charged his phone, and finally turned it on successfully. At the same time, he also saw the time displayed, May 20th, 2002, it was now 8 o'clock in the morning. He walked to the window and opened the curtains. Through the glass of the room, Chen Kai looked at the slightly gloomy scenery outside and couldn't help but start thinking about Barron's memories. Who I am. Where am I? What should I do? These are probably the first things he needs to figure out now. It wasn't until he was brought back to reality by a burst of MIDI music and he followed the sound that he realized that the sound was the incoming call tone of his Motorola mobile phone. After all, Chen Kai had almost forgotten the ringtone of this ancient functional phone, Sean Butler. Looking at the name displayed on the caller's phone, he had associated the corresponding image from Barron's memory. In fact, the original owner of Chen Kai's current body, Baron Cavendish, is an authentic Englishman. At the same time, he was also born in a noble family. Well, his family is not an ordinary noble, but only more than 20 families with dukedoms in the whole of England, the Cavendish family. In 1605, the ancestor of the Cavendish family was named Baron Cavendish, and later Earl of Devonshire in 1618. Then more than 300 years ago, the great-grandson of the first Earl of Devonshire being named the Duke of Devonshire. Over the past 300 years, the Cavendish family has produced several generations of politicians and scientists. It can be said to be one of the oldest ducal families in England. Among all the ducal families in England, according to the qualifications ranked in the top 10. In such a family, before college, Baron received the most traditional education of the British aristocracy. Before high school, he lived in the family's Darcy Manor in Derbyshire, and Butler Sean, the butler who has served in their family for more than 40 years, also grew up watching Baron. New book released, hope everyone can support. Chapter 2 Something Happened. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Why would Butler Sean call himself at this time? With this in mind, Baron answered the phone. Butler Sean, I'm Baron. Young master, I have finally contacted you. I couldn't get through to you when I called you last night. I have asked Ramos to go to London to find you. Baron frowned slightly after hearing Butler Sean's words. You must know that in his memory, Butler Sean always arranged such things in a calm and orderly manner in the manor, but now, just from the tone of his words, he could hear the other party's anxiety. He couldn't help but ask. What happened? Young master, you need to come back quickly. Something happened to the master and the eldest young master. London in May and June is considered to be one of the best periods of the year. In this city where the sky is often gloomy, this is one of the rare times when the sunshine hours are relatively long and you can see more sunshine. It's just that at this time, Baron Cavendish didn't have much leisure and elegance to enjoy the street scenes of London, because he had more important things to face. He didn't expect that he would have to face such a complicated situation just after he came to this time and space and became the son of a duke, but before he could enjoy the life of a noble. After hearing from the old housekeeper that his father and eldest brother in his current body had been in a car accident, the eldest brother died on the spot, and his father had been sent to the hospital for treatment. The situation was not optimistic. As soon as he hung up the phone, he received a call from Ramos, his full-time valet who was sent to London. After learning Baron's location at this time, the other party also drove over with the driver to pick up Baron as quickly as possible. Ordinarily, as Baron's full-time valet, Ramos should always be with him, but Baron didn't like being followed all the time, as it would affect his rich nightlife, so he found an excuse. Ramos was temporarily sent back to Chatsworth in Derbyshire. Moreover, in the new century, the lifestyles of many nobles have gradually changed. For young nobles, some traditions are not too rigid to follow, so his behavior is not too outrageous. Ramos, the call Butler Sean gave me just now was too hasty and didn't explain it in too much detail. Do you have more information? After getting into this well-maintained old Rolls-Royce, Baron tried his best to look solemn and asked Ramos, the co-driver. I still don't know why my father and brother came to London together. They didn't contact me in advance. Master, it is said that the master and the eldest master had urgent matters and wanted to visit an important person, but they did not expect that they encountered a car accident on their way back. As for not contacting you before, it should be because the trip was too rushed. Bar. Ramos tried his best to tell Barron what he knew. Of course, he wisely did not say some things that were inconvenient to say, like why didn't they tell Master Barron in advance when they came to London this time? Well, I'm afraid it's because they are here to do very important business, and this young Master Barron has never been interested in family affairs and is only addicted to pleasure. The Cavendish family, the hereditary Dukes of Devonshire, lived daily at Chatsworth Manor in Derbyshire. This magnificent manor with more than 100 rooms was first built in 1552. During the more than 400 years from the 15th to the 19th century, it was carefully designed and built by many famous gardeners, making Chatsworth Manor the most beautiful in England. One of the manor houses, it is an important part of British cultural heritage. The entire manor covers an area of more than 1,000 acres. It was designed by the landscaping genius Lonrose Brown in the 18th century and was later renovated by 16 generations of descendants. The interior decoration is magnificent, and Chatsworth is extremely famous throughout British history. Queen Mary of England was imprisoned here. The prototype of the Darcy family in the world-famous book Pride and Prejudice is Chatsworth. Master, we will be home soon. Following the words of the full-time valet Ramos, Barron looked through the car window and saw the magnificent manor building against the river, standing in the green grassland like a velvet carpet, with scattered trees. It's like a scene from a movie. When the car stopped at the door of the manor house, Ramos got out and opened the door for Barron. At this time, Barron was wearing a very formal tuxedo, a vest and a white shirt. They were all custom-made by famous designers. After careful tailoring, Barron's straight and well-proportioned figure was perfectly outlined, making everyone who saw him all the people couldn't help but cheer secretly. This is the tradition of the old aristocrats. When he was in Barron's hotel, even at such an emergency moment, Ramos still did not forget to bring his set of clothes and let him change before setting off. Master Barron, it's really great that you can come back. At this time, at the door of the villa, servants stood in 2 rows, and the one at the front was Sean, the butler of the Cavendish family. At this time, he spoke to Barron with a solemn face and a low voice, and even if he tried to restrain his expression, he could still feel the deep sadness in his eyes. Barron took a look at the more than 20 servants standing in 2 rows behind butler Sean, and secretly picked up the numbers one by one from the memory of his predecessor. Of course not everyone had the impression, but there were 2 of them. 3 unfamiliar faces. Butler Sean. Nodding to the butler, Barron said, "Sorry, I haven't recovered from the shock yet. I want to go to the hospital to see my father first. I don't know how he is doing now." Master, he. Butler Sean's eyes immediately turned red when he heard Barron's words. His lips trembled, he took a deep breath and said slowly, "While you were still on the road, sad news came from the hospital." The aristocratic history of the Cavendish family can be traced back to 400 years ago, and for more than 300 years, they have held the title of Duke of Devonshire. This family can be said to have left a deep mark on the history of England. Their family there have been many politicians and scientists including the British Prime Minister, but on this day in 2002, the whole family ushered in the saddest moment, because of a car accident. Not only this generation, the 12th generation of His Excellency the Duke of Devonshire, and his eldest son died successively, but also the 82-year-old Mrs. Devonshire of the previous generation, Baron Co. Wendyish's grandmother was also in critical condition due to the unexpected death of her son and eldest grandson. She passed away on the 3rd day after her son's death. It can be said that at this time, among the direct members of the Duke of Devonshire, the 8th oldest existing ducal family in England, only Baron Cavendish remains. Chapter 3 Estate Tax and Debt. You are listening at novelfull.audio. What comes from dust shall return to dust. May the love of the Lord be with you forever, in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, Amen. It can be said that the funeral of the Devonshire family shocked the entire British aristocratic circle. After all, within a few days, 3 direct members of the family passed away one after another. In such a large ducal family, only the youngest son who had just grown up was left. This thing has not happened in England for too many years. The last time this kind of memory can be traced back to the 2 World Wars. This time the funeral of the Cavendish family was also quite grand. Not only were many nobles present, but even His Royal Highness the Crown Prince of Wales came to Derbyshire in person to attend the funeral. Lord Baron, please have your condolences. This is also the first time in 2 lives that Baron has seen a celebrity of the level of His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales. However, now is not the time for him to get excited. What he has experienced in the past few days has made him calm about anything. Your Highness, thank you very much for coming here. In fact, through this period of understanding, he also understood that the reason why His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales came in person may not be because of his current father, the 12th Duke of Devonshire, but because of his grandmother. The 11th Duchess of Devonshire, speaking of her predecessor, the grandmother was also an extremely famous person. Her name was Deborah Cavendish. She was once one of the famous 6 Mitford sisters in the British upper class. She was born on March 31, 1920. She was the son of David Ford, 2nd Baron Ridsdale. Young daughter of Freeman Mitford and Sidney Freeman Mitford. Her family had been ennobled since the Germanic conquest, 5th to 6th century. It can be said that throughout World War II, the 6 Mitford sisters with very different personalities and political leanings were one of the most well-known labels in the British aristocratic circle. It was like the Prince of Wales stood for a long time in front of Deborah Cavendish's photo and said to Baron, "She will be greatly missed and she is not someone who will be forgotten easily. The joy she gave everyone through those books and her contribution to Chatsworth will not be forgotten." After the funeral, all the guests left, and the entire Chatsworth estate returned to silence, but the matter is not over yet. What Baron needs to face is an even more troublesome thing. According to relevant British laws, as the 2nd son of the family, it can be said that the burden of the family will not fall on him. His predecessor thought so since he was a child. As the eldest son, his brother will inherit the Duke of Devonshire title, and the other party is stable and mature, and has been trained as the heir of the family for a long time. In everyone's opinion, he is also the most suitable successor. As the 2nd son of the family, Baron Cavendish will at most inherit another lower-level title. Well, at most he will receive part of the property. Moreover, no matter who looks at it, this young master, who has a light personality and likes to hang out in nightclubs, although he looks more handsome, his out-of-the-box personality really does not look like a traditional aristocrat, but things were so dramatic. His father and brother died in a car accident at the same time. As the only direct member of the Cavendish family, Baron became the first heir and would inherit the title of Duke of Devonshire, as well as the family's title. All property. Normally, he would be able to successfully become a British aristocrat with the flag and live a boring, shameless aristocratic life, but things were not that simple. After asking butler Sean, especially after checking the family's asset bills, Baron understood what kind of dilemma he was facing. First of all, as the heir of the family, if he wants to inherit the title and family property, he must first solve the huge inheritance tax problem. Normally, the inheritance tax rate in England is as high as 40%, now it is much less, sometimes as high as 80%. However, the Cavendish family simply had the foresight to package most of the family's assets in trust funds. This can exempt a large part of the inheritance tax, but the remaining fees that need to be paid are still quite a lot. However, the inheritance tax is probably not the biggest headache among the troubles he has to face, because the debt of the entire family is what he needs to solve most at this time. This starts with Baron's grandfather. The entire Cavendish family has been passed down to Baron's generation, who is the 18th and 13th Duke of Devonshire. At the peak of the Devonshire family, there were 8 extremely huge estates in England and Ireland, covering an area of more than 200,000 acres. The inheritance tax paid by the Devonshire family alone once exceeded £1 million British pounds, that was £1 million in the early 19th century. It can be said that ordinary people at that time may not be able to save hundreds of pounds in a lifetime. From the time of the 10th Duke of Devonshire, Baron's great-grandfather, due to the poor management of the previous Duke of Devonshire and the economic environment of the entire UK at that time in the Great Depression, Devonshire. The financial situation of the Duke's family was dire. The 10th Duke of Devonshire felt that the previous huge inheritance tax had brought a burden to the family, so he tried every means to evade the huge inheritance tax through the fund model to reduce the burden on future generations. According to the regulations at the time, it took 5 years before the estate could be eligible for exemption from estate tax after being packaged into a trust fund. The 10th Duke of Devonshire was in the prime of life at the time, and without considering the special circumstances of his health, he did not hesitate to hand over all his property to the trust fund. Something unexpected happened. At the beginning of the 5th year after the 10th Duke of Devonshire handed over his property, he suddenly died of a heart attack 3 months before the 5-year deadline. As his successor, the 11th Duke of Devonshire, Andrew, that is, Barron's grandfather, faces an inheritance tax rate of up to 80%, needing to pay an inheritance tax of £7 million. There are 2 choices before Andrew. One is to sell the inheritance and pay off the property tax and then inherit the inheritance. The other is to earn the £7 million through his own efforts. In the end, Barron's father chose the latter in order to preserve most of the family's inherited property. He first sold part of his property to pay part of the inheritance tax, including nearly 60,000 acres of land, a Hardwick manor, part of the collection including Rembrandt and Raphael paintings. Then, he worked hard to make money to pay off the inheritance tax, and finally paid off the inheritance tax of £7 million in 1974 through installment payment, thus becoming the real Devon Hill Duke. It can be said that Barron's grandfather preserved hope for the future family, but the problem lies with Barron's father. After the family was finally able to make a profit by opening up the manor, undertaking events, and opening hotels and other industries, he did not expect that at this time, due to investment, he would make a profit. Huge losses. After reviewing the family's assets and debt list, and with the explanations from butler Sean and the family trust fund manager, Barron was speechless and discovered that the debt of the entire family trust at this time exceeded £30 million. In addition, if he wants to successfully inherit the dukedom and keep the family assets, then he will need to spend at least more than £35 million, including inheritance tax. At this moment, Barron even had the idea of giving up everything and starting over. Chapter 4: Going Bankrupt. You are listening at novelfull.audio. So, we're going bankrupt. In the study room of Chatsworth Manor, Barron put down the financial report in his hand, looked at the 2 people in front of him and said, "Although it won't go bankrupt, if we can't get back the money we invested in the London Star, then I'm afraid we will need to sell off most of our assets in order to meet the bank's loan." By then, the person who spoke to Barron was Julia Moore, the administrator of the Cavendish Family Trust Fund. She is a woman who exudes mature charm. However, although Julia has a great figure, even wearing a women's suit, it is difficult to hide her body curves, but at this time, Barron has no intention to pay attention to this. He needs to understand the current situation of the Cavendish family as soon as possible. The real situation. Having said that, the reason why Barron's grandmother, the old lady in the family, has such prestige is mainly because she is good at management. Initially, after World War II, she saved Cavendish by changing her business ideas. Most of the Sioux family's assets, Barron's grandfather, the 11th Duke of Devonshire, faced huge inheritance taxes at the time. With the help of the old lady, after more than 20 years of hard work, he opened Chatsworth Manor, one of the few remaining estates in England. Many super estates allow the public to visit, and undertake various activities and filming to make profits, which can be used to pay off the inheritance tax. Many people have watched the British TV series Downton Abbey that later became very famous, and I am afraid they are deeply impressed by the Downton Abbey in this TV series. But the land at Chatsworth Manor owned by the Duke of Devonshire family covers an area of 35,000 acres. What is this concept? It is 7 times the area of Highclere Castle, where Downton Abbey was filmed, and is equivalent to half of London. Therefore, it can be said that Chatsworth Manor is far larger than the magnificent manor in Downton Abbey, so after it is opened, it can also bring certain benefits to the family. Even so, the entire family will only make a slight profit and will only maintain it, because in addition to Chatsworth Manor, the family now owns 2 manors and adjacent lands in Ireland and Scotland. After entering the new era, the output of these manors and land can no longer be easily squandered by such a Family as before, and the annual repair and maintenance costs of these manors can be said to be astronomical. Since World War II, countless aristocrats have gone bankrupt and are unable to maintain their original luxurious lives, thus living in embarrassment. Now, there are fewer and fewer families that can continue the traditional aristocratic pomp. Those aristocratic families that can survive all have other industrial investments and can feed back traditional industries. What's more, government policies are becoming increasingly unfriendly to the aristocratic class, both in terms of taxation and policies. Unintentionally weakening the interests of the aristocratic class. Therefore, the Cavendish family also tried to invest in some emerging industries later, but unfortunately, it seems that the two generations of Barron's grandfather and father did not have much investment in emerging industries. Strong ability, but there have been a lot of losses, large and small. But if that were just the case, I'm afraid the Cavendish family wouldn't have fallen into Barron's current situation. The problem lies in his late father, who somehow believed in the temptation of high returns and mortgaged many of his family's assets into an investment company called London Star. Yes, it was true, this so-called London Star is completely a Ponzi scheme. At the beginning, the old Cavendish was not too deeply involved, but only invested a small amount of capital tentatively, but that's what a Ponzi scheme is. In the beginning, it gave extremely high returns to the initial users through the funds of subsequent customers. These gradually strengthened the confidence of the old Cavendish, coupled with the influence of the Internet 2 years ago. The impact of the bubble has also severely affected traditional industries. As a result, Cavendish Sr. began to continuously increase his investment in the London Star. Faced with high return expectations, he actually mortgaged many of the family's assets and invested in this Ponzi scheme from bank loans. You can imagine what happened next. A month ago, London Star began to stop issuing dividends, and many users' redemption requests were also temporarily frozen. Now old Cavendish is panicking. If it is really confirmed that this London Star is a scam, then the whole family will fall into an abyss. Therefore, he has been working hard for this during this period, but his effect is limited, and the London Star still thundered. This time he took Barron's eldest brother to London. Old Cavendish also wanted to rely on the family's previous relationships to go to London to meet powerful people, and at least try to use part of the funds invested in the London Star to take back. Thinking about it, the result must be unsatisfactory. By this time, apart from squandering and returning the other party's funds to early investors, I am afraid that within a month, almost all of the other party's funds have been transferred. Then at this moment, a car accident happened. I'm afraid that his grandmother's sudden death was not only a shock caused by the death of old Cavendish and his eldest son, but also because the other party knew the relevant inside story. But the deceased is gone, and the one who needs to face this mess now is Barron. Don't forget that many properties of the family trust fund, including the Chatsworth Manor where he currently lives, are mortgaged to banks. Once those loans cannot be repaid, I am afraid that Barron, the newly promoted Duke, will have to. He was kicked out of the family manor and became the laughing stock of all England. He didn't want his own deeds to appear when others searched for the term the most miserable Duke in England. That would be too shameful. Ms. Moore, please give me a catalogue of the current family trust fund's properties. I want to know which properties have been mortgaged and cannot be used, and which properties can be sold for funds. Barron tapped the table and said to the two people in front of him. And Butler Sean, I also need a directory listing the family's assets outside of the family trust fund. Although most of the family's assets have been injected into the family trust fund, there are still some assets that are directly in the family's name, and Barron needs to understand these clearly. Yes, your lordship. Regarding Barron's words, Julia Moore agreed very neatly, but Butler Sean hesitated, as if he wanted to say something. What, Butler Sean, do you have anything to say? Master, I know that in the current situation, selling off some properties is a last resort, but Chapter 5 must bear the weight. You are listening at novelfull.audio. In England, heirs are allowed to sell part of the inherited assets to pay inheritance tax. However, when many nobles are facing huge inheritance taxes, it is a very difficult choice to sell their properties on a large scale to pay inheritance taxes, because the education these nobles received since childhood is different from that of ordinary civilians. In aristocratic families, their children's education emphasizes their sense of responsibility for the entire family. In other words, the title and family property you get will belong to you, but it does not completely belong to you, because both the title and the family's assets are generated through accumulation from generation to generation, so when you get these, likewise, you need to assume corresponding responsibilities. If you want to wear the crown, you must bear its weight. This is why Barron's grandfather, when faced with an inheritance tax of up to £7 million, only sold a small part of the family property, mainly part of the land, to pay the inheritance tax, and was willing to spend the next 24 years, through working day after day, to repay the inheritance tax arrears, and finally preserve the family industry as much as possible, because growing up in such a family, the achievements of the dukes of the past generations, and the glory that shines in British history, are the responsibilities that the heirs of this family need to bear. They cannot let the family be shamed, and they cannot let the family fall apart. These can be said to be the beliefs engraved in the bones and blood of every family member, including butler Sean, who has served in the family for more than 40 years. I am afraid that in his heart, he will also regard the honor of the Duke of Devonshire family, seeing it as more important than your own life, because Sean is not only the steward of the entire family, but he also took over the position of steward of the family from his father. It can be said that their family has served the Duke of Devonshire family for life for 3 generations. Just consider yourself part of the entire family. This is why butler Sean said such things to Barron at this time. For example, Julia Moore, although she can serve as the manager of the family trust fund and has close ties with the Duke of Devonshire family, her affection for this family will not exceed that of butler Sean. For Julia, she certainly hopes that the Cavendish family can rebound, but in the end, the use and management direction of the family trust fund will be decided by the family heirs. Even if she is Barron's order, even if you don't think so in your heart, you will do the same, but Barron can be said to have been watched by butler Sean since he was a child. Butler Sean knows his character and abilities better, coupled with the critical situation facing the family at this time. He really did not want most of the family's industry to end in Barron's hands, so after hesitation, he expressed his worries. Butler Sean, although you are the butler, in fact, I regard you as my elder, so I hope you believe me. Everything I do is to preserve the family's wealth. Barron knew what kind of person his predecessor was, and he had already anticipated the resistance he would encounter when using those funds after taking over the family. At this time, he looked directly at butler Sean and said to him sincerely, "Perhaps my previous performance will make you lack confidence, but that is because my brother will do a good job as the heir, and I do not need to bear too much responsibility. But it is different now. At this time, we all have the same purpose, so I just hope you can give me your trust and help me get through this crisis." To be honest, Barron at this moment actually feels a bit strange in the eyes of butler Sean. Even though he grew up watching him, the temperament displayed by Barron at this moment is different from that of the previous one, who could be called young people, who can be called playboys or dandies, are completely different. This discovery also surprised butler Sean, and at the same time he also had some expectations in his heart. Can the young man in front of him really lead the Cavendish family to glory again? Intellectually, butler Sean feels that this is unlikely, but often at this time, people always hope more for a miracle to happen. "I will sort out a list for you, Master Barron." Sean Butler finally wanted to give it a try. After arriving at the manor, Barron felt the service enjoyed by the nobles for the first time. "Well, to be honest, it was a little uncomfortable at first, but once I got used to it, it felt really good." Just like in his previous life, he couldn't imagine the kind of thing where other people would help put on the clothes, button them up, and finally put them in order. But here, all this will be done by a valet. You only need to stretch out your hand, and the other party will help you put on your clothes. Standing there, they will help you organize your clothes. It is simply a matter of putting on clothes and reaching out. Of course, what is different from what many people imagine is that in orthodox aristocratic families, of course those of a certain size, these things are done by dedicated male servants, and there are usually no personal maids to serve male family members. Kind of thing. Often valets serve female members, valets serve male members. However, having one more servant in a family is of course not as simple as adding more food. It requires salary and some corresponding benefits. Therefore, Unless there is a family of a certain size, a dedicated full-time personal servant is often very luxurious. Master, did we lose a lot of money? After helping Barron tidy up his clothes, Ramos stood behind him and asked slightly hesitantly. Did you hear what others said? Barron turned back to look at Ramos and asked. Yes, some servants are talking about it, and everyone is a little worried. Barron also had expectations for these. Perhaps what Ramos asked was not just something he wanted to know, but many people also wanted to use him to confirm those rumors. Since the last century, servants of noble families have had a certain degree of independence. It does not mean that all servants in this family belong to this family, rather, the relationship between the same families is more of an employment relationship. If a servant makes a mistake, the most you can do is fire him, or if it is a more serious mistake, then call the police. There is no such thing as lynching. Although they are called servants, it is actually just a job for them. In the final analysis, they are earning wages for their livelihood, so it is very common for them to change jobs when there is a better place to go. In such a family, there are very few secrets, especially among the servants. News often spreads quickly, everyone is making a living. If this place is going to be dilapidated, they will definitely want to find another way out as soon as possible. Ramos, there are some difficulties now, but I believe we can get through it. It won't be smooth sailing at any time, right? Chapter 6 News Report. You are listening at novelfull.audio. In earlier times, in aristocratic manners, masters and servants lived in two areas, upstairs and downstairs, respectively. They were divided into master's living area and servant's living area. These two areas were distinct. Generally speaking, kitchen servants are not allowed to appear in the living room without being called by the master, and family members often would not go to the place where the servants lived. It would be considered a very rude behavior. If the master needs to summon a servant for something, he will do it by ringing a bell. Just like watching many movies and TV shows about old aristocrats, you can often see the master pressing the wake-up bell after getting up, and the servant's rattle will ring, which represents the master's call. Until now, many noble families still retain this tradition. The only slight difference is that in the old days, the transmission of rattles was through mechanical structures. In modern society, they have all become electric bells. Through Ramos, Barron also generally understood the slightly anxious mood of the servants in his house, but he didn't care about it at this time. In fact, except for a few people such as the family's butler Sean and housekeeper Riley, who have been serving the Cavendish family for 2 or 3 generations, most of the servants in the manor have a simple employment relationship. At this time, Barron's idea was very simple. Taking advantage of the current situation to let some less determined servants leave would not be a bad thing, and more than 30 servants are really too many. Master Barron, this is the catalogue of assets we hold directly, most of which are not mortgaged. Butler Sean moved very quickly. After Barron had breakfast in the morning, he had already handed over his calculated asset list to him. Barron took the catalogue, read it, sighed, and said, "It seems that the situation at home is indeed not good. Yes, most of the assets of the estate, as well as the funds needed for daily operations, are transferred through the family trust fund. In this way, the real assets directly held by the family at this time, apart from a small amount of cash, are only some jewelry and clothing items that are not easy to sell. Of course, after hundreds of years of accumulation, especially in the Devonshire family, there once appeared a single nobleman who was obsessed with art, and their collection can be said to be huge. Just like the 11th Duke, the paintings by Rembrandt and Raphael that he sold to pay inheritance taxes were only a small part of his family's collection. There are still many paintings by Rembrandt in his family. There are also more than a dozen paintings by Raphael. This can also show the heritage of the Devonshire family. Even talking about it makes me feel like my family is facing bankruptcy, but the value of these works of art alone is enough for the family to survive. But Barron also knows that it is very unwise to sell these works of art now, because the price of these collections is really different compared to later. It is more than 10 times or even dozens of times, and it is less than nothing. No way, he won't sell these collections, but now, Barron needs to save the family and at least return it to good operation, which will require at least £35 million of funds. It can be said that the ordinary jewelry and other items in the catalogue now, even if they are all sold, will not exceed £500,000 can be said to be a drop in the bucket. What's more, given the current situation, if you want to sell off your jewelry, I'm afraid it won't fetch a very good price. Not to mention, if word spreads, more people will realize that the Cavendish family is now in the most embarrassing situation. But Barron's worries soon seemed less important, because when his valet Ramos brought today's newspaper with a solemn expression, Barron frowned when he saw the report. Because reports about the Duke of Devonshire family appeared in many newspapers today. Of course, because his father and eldest brother died in a car accident, there were a lot of reports about the Duke of Devonshire family, one of the few remaining ducal families in the UK, during the funeral and the period before, but the difference is that today's reports are all focused on the financial situation of the Duke of Devonshire family. Almost all reports pointed out that the Duke of Devonshire family invested huge sums of money in the London Star fraud case that just broke out. Some newspapers even revealed that many of the assets of their family trust funds have been mortgaged to banks. Once they are unable to return them due to huge losses, most of the family assets will be forcibly recovered. It can be said that these reports may soon make their family a hot topic in the near future, making their situation even more difficult. Just when Barron was wondering why these reports suddenly appeared, his cell phone rang. It was Julia Moore, the administrator of the Family Trust Fund. "Lord Barron, did you see the newspaper report?" "I just saw that, Ms. Moore. The situation is not good, and this sudden report has a great impact on us." Hearing Julia's words, Barron frowned again. "What's going on?" "It's the bank. The bank where we took out the mortgage loan contacted me and wanted to know whether it has the ability to repay." At this time, Barron glanced at the butlers Sean and Ramos in the room, lowered his voice and asked. "It shouldn't be like this. When the loan was given, there was a certain time limit. Why are they in a hurry now?" "That's why they're just calling to ask, but I have to say it's a way of applying pressure." "Do you have any news about the reports? Why did such reports suddenly appear?" "That there is indeed something wrong, because although the title of the Duke of Devonshire is already the highest level outside the royal family, their family is actually low-key. Except for the recent car accident, this kind of thing has been widely reported before. It goes back to nearly half a century ago when my grandfather was faced with high inheritance taxes and almost couldn't inherit the family business, but now after the funeral, their investment losses are suddenly reported on such a large scale. There may be some unknown reasons behind it. I also asked someone to investigate. It was a tabloid in London that first broke the news. They reported it yesterday. Later, it attracted the attention of other newspapers, so today's reports appeared. If you have time, could you come over today, Ms. Moore? I hope to have a good talk with you about the Family Trust Fund." "Okay, Mr. Lord, I will visit in the afternoon. In addition, you need to pay attention. It is very likely that many reporters will appear at the manor recently, or even go directly to interview." After hanging up the phone, Barron put the newspaper reports aside for the time being. Although these reports had an impact on him, he now had higher priorities to deal with. In the final analysis, as long as the funding problem is solved, no matter what kind of conspiracy, we will eventually defeat it all. And in the final analysis, the Devonshire family's heritage is not at the end of its rope as described in the reports. In his previous life, Barron had worked in the financial industry for many years and had conducted in-depth research on overseas markets. As one of the world's financial centers, London is also something he can take advantage of at this time. Yes. Even if rebirth happened and he didn't come to the Duke's family, he was still confident that he could make a breakthrough based on his experience in his previous life. And in fact, the family's real assets at this time are far greater than the so-called liabilities. It's just that the global economy has not yet begun to recover, so the selling prices of many assets are far lower than their actual values. Thinking of this, Barron's heart moved. Could someone be spying on these assets of the Cavendish family? Chapter 7 Downsizing. You are listening at novelfull.audio. If Barron is given enough time, he is confident that with a certain amount of original capital, he can earn enough money in the capital market to save the family assets. But now it seems that I still need to speed up the progress, so the initial amount of original capital is more important. This is what he is doing now, trying to raise as much funds as he can use. At this time, there are actually many financial investment opportunities. For example, international oil prices have started to rise since the end of last year. Now, the international oil price is around $25 per barrel. Although there will be fluctuations in the future, it will generally be in an upward channel. It was not until mid-July 2008 that the international oil price reached a high point. Close to $150 per barrel. It can be said that this is a long-term bullish opportunity, but in the short term, if you want to solve the current funding problem, you need a way that can produce faster results. Master Barron, there is something you need to decide. At this time, the butler Sean said to Barron. It's about the arrangement of servants. Now we have 3 more personal servants at home. In addition, given our current situation, I'm afraid the previous configuration of servants can also be adjusted, which can save a lot of money. What the butler Sean was referring to was that after Barron's father, eldest brother and grandmother passed away, the trio's personal servants became redundant, and now there is only one member of the Cavendish family, Barron, which means that he is the only master left in this manner. Therefore, the original number of servants of more than 30 people is reduced to it seems too much and could be streamlined. After all, as a butler, Sean must consider the main family first. Speaking of these, we need to talk about some configurations of servants in noble families. Generally in a traditional aristocratic family, there will be a butler who serves as the head of all servants. Just like in the Cavendish family, the butler is Sean, who can usually be called the butler directly. He is responsible for coordinating and managing the affairs of the entire family, as well as taking care of some more valuable items, such as the wine cellar and silver tableware. In addition, there will be a housekeeper who is mainly responsible for managing the maids in the home. In addition to serving as the housekeeper's assistant, she is responsible for directing the tidying and cleaning of the home. In the Cavendish family, the housekeeper is named Riley. She has been the housekeeper of the family since her mother's generation. Then there is the cook, who is responsible for the affairs of the kitchen. Usually the cook, the male butler and the female housekeeper are all high-level servants. The cook enjoys supreme rights in the kitchen. For example, at some family banquets, the cook has the right to refuse requests for meals other than the menus set in advance. Then there are valets and valets. A valet is a servant who accompanies female members to take care of their daily life. A valet is a servant who accompanies male members to take care of their daily life. As for other male servants and maids, when there are more than 2, there will also be certain levels, such as chief male servant, first male servant, etc. Therefore, for a family of the size of the Duke of Devonshire, it is very normal for each family member to have his own personal servant. Even Barron stayed in London most of the time before, and the family made arrangements for him. Ramos, the valet. So now, there is no need to retain the 3 redundant personal servants, which can also save the manor's expenses. In addition, the original number of servants of more than 30 people can also be streamlined. How was it usually handled before? After hearing Barron's question, butler Sean said. They will all be dismissed. When there is no need for so many people, the decision will be based on their daily performance. And when we dismiss them, for those servants who have worked hard for the family before, we can help them to be the next one. Patrons write letters of recommendation, which are often very helpful for their subsequent job applications. Then let's proceed like this. Butler Sean, you can decide these things. Barron waved his hand and said. In addition. Butler Sean hesitated for a moment. Anna, the old lady's former personal housekeeper, is almost 60 years old and has served the old lady for 40 years. I'm afraid it will be difficult for her to find another job at her age. We cannot be impersonal towards such a person. You can ask her opinion. If she still wants to work, then we can provide her with an easier job. If she hopes to live a long life, then we can pay for her future expenses. Part of the cost of living. In the beginning, more respectable aristocratic families would provide pensions for servants like Anna who had served the family for most of their lives. However, with the improvement of the entire social security system, their salary already includes this part of the pension. Therefore, what Barron said is to provide the other party with an additional subsidy in addition to the pension. You are so kind, Master Barron. God will bless you. Originally, the butler Sean was a little worried. Based on his previous understanding of Master Barron, he was likely to be unkind, so after Barron said such words, he did not hesitate to praise him and was still very emotional. Then if you look at this asset catalog, if you don't sell those jewelry and antiques, how much cash can you get out? Barron asked, handing back to him the inventory of assets that butler Sean had given to his family to hold directly. In my opinion, at most £100,000 of funds can be used. Hearing this amount, Barron sighed. Most of his family's assets have been injected into the family trust fund, and he believed that the cash portion of the assets originally held directly would inevitably be invested in the London Star fraud project. At this point, this part of the assets can only be used for Barron's investment with £100,000 of funds, just as Sean's butler said to him, but with this money, it is very difficult and almost impossible to get back the planned £35 million of funds in the capital market, even though Barron has experience in his previous life, for the capital market at this time. He can only remember some key nodes at most. It is impossible to remember all the price trends of investment products. Seeing Barron's slightly melancholy expression, butler Sean said. Master, are you going to use it to pay inheritance tax? In fact, you can temporarily sell those jewelry and antiques or mortgage them. I'm going to invest it, otherwise I won't have the money to pay the inheritance tax and bank loans anyway. Invest? Butler Sean was shocked when he heard that Barron was ready to invest. But master, investment is risky. It is very possible that all the money will be lost. It can be seen that after the family's investment loss in the London Star, butler Sean is particularly sensitive to the word investment. What's more, in his eyes, how could the young master, who only used to spend time in alcohol, invest? Even the master lost such a large sum of money because of investment, which put the Cavendish family into such a situation at this time. In the midst of a big crisis. Chapter 8 Frustration. You are listening at novelfull.audio. I don't want this either, butler Sean, but there is no other way, right? As the heir of the family, you need to shoulder your own responsibilities, that is, you must try your best to preserve our family's assets. Barron looked directly into butler Sean's eyes and said sincerely. If there is still a way, then I don't want to take the risk, but it is too difficult. Under the current situation, if you want to get the best results, you need to take certain risks. But I can do it to you, promise, butler Sean. I won't risk too much money. This £100,000 plus some from the family fund should be enough. After all, butler Sean has deep feelings for his family and does not want the family to fall apart, but at the same time, he also has little confidence in Barron's risky behavior. But as Barron said, it is difficult to have other options now. Selling part of the property is one of the methods, but in the face of the previous huge losses, if you really have to do this, I am afraid that even it's hard to stay at Worth Manor. So at this moment, he could only choose to believe Barron and secretly pray to God to bless the Cavendish family. Master Barron, I will do my best to reduce the expenditure of the manor. Over the long years, Chatsworth Manor has had many critical moments, but we have finally resolved them. I hope it will be the same this time. I will definitely do it, butler Sean. Barron did not hide the firmness in his eyes and turned to the butler. By the way, I didn't know much about the family trust fund before. Regarding the fund manager, Ms. Moore, butler Sean, can you tell me more about her? That if Barron is planning to use part of his funds to make more radical investments, butler Sean is just worried about this. Then in the case of Ms. Julia Moore, the manager of the family trust fund, his proposal was decisively rejected. Lord Barron, I have to say it bluntly, if you are preparing to raise funds to pay inheritance taxes, or if you are selling part of the family assets to make up for losses and pay for bank loans, then I will definitely cooperate with you, but if you want to take these make risky investments with your money, sorry, I can't do that. When Julia Moore came to face Barron again in the master's study at Chatsworth Manor and learned what he thought, she said this without hesitation. Oh. Are you sure? Ms. Moore, then I would like to know, as the manager of the family fund, how did you react to my father's investment in the London Star? Hearing Barron mention this matter, Julia's expression instantly turned cold. Do you think I am responsible for this investment, Lord Baron? It doesn't make much sense to talk about responsibility now, but I think as the manager of a family fund, all you need to do is use your professional knowledge to help us manage the family industry, rather than make decisions about it. I know it was my father's opinion to invest in the London Star, so you can't say that you were cooperating with his investment intention at the time, but you rejected my investment opinion so arbitrarily. Regarding Baron's words, Yulia shook her head. Your Excellency, I still regret that although I raised objections to your father's investment opinions, I did not finally stick to my position, so now, I cannot make the same mistake again. In addition, in fact, although you are the only heir to the Duke of Devonshire family, but now procedurally, you have not inherited the family title and industry. So you mean you won't obey my orders now? Even if I am the only heir of the family. Baron stood up from his seat and walked to Yulia, still with a smile on his face, and said lightly. It seems that Ms. Moore, you really don't have much confidence in me, or you have no confidence at all. I just said, Your Excellency, if you want to pay inheritance tax for inheriting the title and family assets, or to stop the family's losses, then I will fully cooperate with you, but if it is such a risky investment, Yulia was not weak at all in terms of momentum, and she did not escape Baron's look. Then I won't agree. Maybe you are right. I respect your status as heir, but as the manager of the family trust fund, I can't take risks. Even in the future, you will expel me from this position. Walk. Obviously, this meeting between the two did not produce a result that satisfied Baron. It can be said that they broke up in the end on bad terms, but it is true that as Yulia said, even though Baron is the sole heir of the Cavendish family, in the final analysis, he has not yet completed the procedures for inheriting the family title and industry. Therefore, as the manager of the family trust fund, you can choose to take risks and cooperate with Baron's investment, or you can refuse the other party's request. Currently, Baron has no way to do this. It can still be seen from her appearance that Yulia's appearance is still different from that of traditional British people. The reason is that she contains most of the Slavic ancestry. In the previous conversation with Sean Butler, Baron also learned more about Julia Moore. Yulia Moore's full name should be Yulia Shakovskoy Moore. Her mother's family came from Russia. After the October Revolution, they fled from Tsarist Russia to Europe, and finally came to England. It can be said that most of the Tsarist Russian nobles who were in exile at that time were not doing well. On the one hand, they left Tsarist Russia too hastily, and they also encountered many setbacks along the way, including deception and plunder, so they were really able to retain there are very few exiled nobles who own a certain amount of property. Although Yulia's mother's generation has integrated into British society, the family's life can only be described as middle class. Her mother was married to a lawyer who was closely related to the Cavendish family. Therefore, after Yulia's father died in an accident, Yulia's family received help from the Cavendish family. It can be said that Yulia was able to complete her studies largely due to the support from the Cavendish family. It was also because of this relationship that the family originally chose Julia Moore, who graduated from a prestigious school, as the manager of the family trust fund. This trust originated from this, but now it seems that Yulia's trust in Baron is quite lacking. The idea of obtaining funds from family funds for investment was basically rejected. The funds currently available to Baron are only £100,000 from assets directly held by the family, unless he can pay the inheritance tax as soon as possible and complete the inheritance procedures for the family title and industry. It seems that it will be difficult to get more support from Yulia. Chapter 9 Going to London. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Baron's sleep was pretty good last night. When he woke up, he did not summon his valet Ramos. Instead, after washing, he got dressed and prepared to go for a walk in the manor. I have to say that when it comes to enjoyment, the British aristocrats are very knowledgeable. As the saying goes, when clothes come, you can stretch out your hands, and when food comes, you can open your mouth. Until the last century, those traditional aristocratic houses did not need to get out of bed after getting up in the morning. They only needed to press the bell button on the bedside, and the personal servant would place breakfast on a special small table. Sent to the bed in the bedroom, in other words, those nobles could just lean on the bed and start enjoying breakfast. Of course, everything is changing. After the new century, not only the common people, but also the lifestyle of the nobles have undergone great changes. Chatsworth is built on the riverside. Just the back garden of this manor covers an area of 150 acres. Barron walked straight through the flower maze and stood in front of a waterfall in the back garden. Listening to the sound of gurgling water, he couldn't help but start thinking about what he needed to do next. After yesterday's conversation, he has determined that the funds currently available are only £100,000. With these funds, he wants to obtain the total £3,500 he needs in the financial market to put the Cavendish family's assets into a healthy state. The amount of £10,000 can be said to be very difficult. After all, with a return ratio of 350 times, it is very difficult for him to have a rough impression of the price trends of some investment products. After all, those memories cannot be too accurate, and the more investment products with large circulation, the more price fluctuations will be correspondingly much smaller. As for the so-called 100-fold stocks and 1,000-fold stocks, the premise must be that the market is not too big, which will also face the difficulty of leaving the battlefield. Therefore, if he uses too high leverage, a small price fluctuation may cause his position to be liquidated. But if we don't do this, how can we achieve such a high rate of return in the short term? Having said that, it is still possible not to get it all at once. First obtain the funds, pay the inheritance tax, and then complete the control of the family trust fund. This is also an option. After all, once he controls the use of the family trust fund, you can get more funds for your own use. Master Barron, you are here. Butler Sean, when did you come here? It's been a while, but I saw you were thinking, so I didn't bother you. After Barron had a plan for the future, he stood up and moved his body. He heard the voice of Sean's butler behind him, and the two started chatting casually. Butler Sean was wearing a formal tuxedo and bow tie as usual, and his whole person had a meticulous atmosphere. Very grand, isn't it? Barron turned back and glanced at the Chatsworth villa. The morning sun shone on it, covering it with a light golden pink. Yes, Master Barron, the Cavendish family has been operating here for more than 400 years. Now, many of the famous families in the past have declined. Butler Sean sighed and said with emotion. Young master, my grandfather is the steward of the Cavendish family, and my father is also the steward of the Cavendish family. My biggest wish since I was a child is to become the steward of the Cavendish family and protect the continuity of this family. This manor has been in service for more than 40 years, and every inch of land has been engraved in my flesh and blood. It can be said that this place has become more important than my life. I hope that the moment I close my eyes and return to heaven forever, when the Dish family can still shine. Barron could observe that although Butler Sean still had the same expressionless look as before, his eyes were slightly bloodshot. It seemed that he did not rest well last night. I'll do my best to do it, Sean Butler. After hearing this, Butler Sean nodded and said nothing more. Yesterday, after hearing the news that Barron wanted to use the £100,000 to invest, although Butler Sean did not react as violently as Yulia at the time, he only raised his concerns tactfully, but Barron understands that in the final analysis, he still has great doubts about his investment behavior. That's why at this time, he once again used this method to admonish. Barron didn't explain much about this. He knew that the so-called confidence of others in him was not something that could be said by words, but needed to be proven through facts time and time again. Therefore, no matter what he claims now, he cannot change the fact that the previous Barron did not leave a very reassuring impression on everyone. These can only be changed through his own success again and again. It has to be said that apart from the current financial crisis that the family is facing, if there is anything that Barron criticizes the most, it is the British diet. This is also easy to understand. After all, I came from China, which has countless delicacies, to this magical country where dark cuisine is everywhere, and the taste is too different, so it must be difficult to adapt. At some point, Barron had the shocking thought of cooking Chinese food himself, which would violate aristocratic etiquette. No matter what, Barron will hire an extra Chinese chef for himself in the future. But this is still a detail and is not something that will be solved immediately. After breakfast, Barron took his valet and driver Ramos, drove the Rolls-Royce, and prepared to go to London. Butler Sean, I have to leave the affairs of the manor to you. I will be back as soon as possible. When saying goodbye to the housekeeper, the other person's expression was still a little solemn. "Master, I still think it would be better to take the train to London, or ask Richard to go with you." Maybe it was the previous car accident between the old Duke and the eldest young master that made Butler Sean feel a lot uneasy about Barron taking a car to London this time. If it weren't for the fact that the manor couldn't do without him, Butler Sean would have wanted to follow him in person. "The young master is going with us. Don't worry, Butler Sean, we're leaving. If you need anything, just call me." After finally persuading the other party, Barron quickly waved to him and got into the back seat of the car. Today is May 30th, and it has been 10 days since Barron came to this world. On the way to London, with £100,000 in capital, Barron was already thinking about his next plan. Everything starts from tomorrow, because tomorrow is May 31st, and at the same time, it is also the time when the World Cup starts. Chapter 10 Unpopular. You are listening at novelfull.audio. In fact, Barron's original idea was to raise more than £2 million of funds from the family, so that he would be sure to use the money to get back more than £35 million of funds through the capital market within 6 months to save Devon, the Duke of Hill family, but the reality is that the funds he can currently use are only part of the cash directly held by the family, which accounts for a very small share, only £100,000. With this capital, it is indeed difficult to achieve one's goals in the short term. Even if it is investing in startups and doing venture capital work. Take internet companies such as Google and Facebook, which can be completed 100 times smoothly from startup to the exit of venture capital is often not achieved within a year and a half. In the end, in desperation, Barron had only one choice, to expand the scale of his £100,000 as much as possible through World Cup betting. In fact, this is not difficult to think of. After all, the World Cup is about to begin. This time in the Asahi World Cup, only England and the British Isles has entered the finals. As one of the countries that are crazy about football, the recent newspapers have reported a lot about the World Cup. Therefore, as a reborn person, it is very normal to think of using betting to make a fortune, and the Asahi World Cup itself is very suitable for Barron to choose to place bets. On the one hand, when it came out, this World Cup was still very familiar to Chinese people. Not only was it a World Cup held at home, but the start time was also very familiar to Chinese people. It is said to be very friendly. In addition, because this World Cup is the only one in which the Chinese team has entered the finals, they are more familiar with the results of the game than in other tournaments. And at the end of the day, when betting on this kind of World Cup, you can usually get higher odds only if you are an underdog. Because of well-known reasons, this World Cup has a lot of upsets. If nothing else, it is enough to just bet on the match between South Korea and South Korea. After all, normal countries often do not use the home field advantage so nakedly. Betting on football matches is very popular in England. After all, William Hill, which is well known in the sports betting industry, is a British company. In addition to this company, many other powerful gambling companies also have many betting stations in London, so it is very convenient just for betting. After arriving in London, Barron came to his apartment. Barron's apartment in London is also a family property. After all, the Duke of Devonshire family is a long-established British aristocracy. Although the family's overall economic strength is now slightly weaker, their ancestors are still rich. Correspondingly, it is also very normal to have a residence in London. Of course, in this regard, it is still far inferior to the Duke of Westminster, which is also a ducal family and claims to own half of London. After returning to London, Barron couldn't help but think of the girl in the hotel room when he first came to this time and space. At that time, he just felt that the other person looked familiar, but because he had just came over at that time and was greatly shocked, he did not delve into it too much. And when I met the then Crown Prince of Wales at the family funeral that day, I suddenly realized that the girl with whom I had a one-night stand was actually the future Princess Kaiser. This discovery surprised Barron. After all, although he had no special knowledge of the British royal family in his previous life, Cather's wedding to the prince caused a sensation at that time. At that time, the internet was already extremely popular. He has also read many related reports. If I remember correctly, Cather should have been studying at the University of St Andrews in Scotland at this time and had already met the prince. How could he appear in a London nightclub and have an affair with his predecessor while drunk? What about such a friendship? Since he couldn't figure it out, Barron stopped thinking about it. After all, if the development of history is followed, in 9 years, the girl will marry into the royal family and become Princess Kaiser, and this incident itself was an affair with his predecessor. Well, at most, he saw the other person with his own eyes. The most important thing for him now is to think about how to make money next. The British also have many traditions regarding the death of relatives. Although it is not as exaggerated as the 3-year mourning period in ancient China, as children, they generally will not attend parties and entertainment activities for a few months to half a year. Of course, now, this restriction is getting smaller and smaller, but this time Barron came to London, he was still very low-key. He asked Ramos to help by recent reports about the World Cup, and he also checked online some information about this Asahi World Cup. Tomorrow, May 31st, is the opening of the Asahi World Cup. The opening game of the day will be France, the host of the last World Cup, facing Senegal. Seeing this schedule, Barron's eyes lit up, because he knew very well that in this game, the host of the last World Cup and the eventual champion, the French team, lost the game. So Barron immediately checked the odds of this game, which made him happy. Because of this game, the mainstream odds are 1 minute and 1.2 seconds for France to win and 1:15 for Senegal. In other words, if you buy the French team for £100 to win, you can finally get £120, and you win £20. But if you buy a Senegal victory for £100, you can end up with £1,500. From this odds, it can also be seen that most people are optimistic about the French team winning. This is not surprising. After all, the French team was the winning team in the last World Cup, although some of the weirdness in the final that they defeated Brazil will still be mentioned many years later, but there is no doubt about the strength of the French team. Most of the French team participating in the Asahi World Cup this time are players from the last World Cup. Even if it is very likely that Zidane, the soul of the French team, will not be able to play in tomorrow's game, but Senegal? Speaking of this country, I am afraid not many people know that it is located in West Africa. In terms of popularity, it is as good as the French team. Therefore, this World Cup is really amazing. The opening game was a big upset, which can be regarded as an indication that this World Cup is unusual. After confirming this matter, Barron became excited. He now has £100,000 in funds, and he has the urge to bet all £100,000 on Senegal's victory in tomorrow's opening game. But taking a deep breath, he tried his best to resist the urge. After all, although he had a deep impression of this game in his previous life, he could even remember that when he was in high school, he and his dormitory buddies climbed over the wall to watch this game. But after all, although so far, it seems that the time and space he knows is no different from his previous life, but the fact that his predecessor actually had something to do with the later Princess Kaiser made him a little wary. Get up, what if? So in the end, he decided not to go all in for this game, but to verify first whether the result of the game would be the same as in his memory.